So, Chris.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to get back to your conference last night. I know we've spoken a lot about it today, but there was one thing I wanted to talk to you about regarding your general idea of trying new technology and not being afraid of going towards the new stuff that we can play with today. As you know, I'm part of the accessibility community, so I have a few concerns with HTML5 in regards to a certain number of elements. Canvas, for example, the shadow DOM, stuff like dropping the long desk attribute or stuff like that. And I'm wondering, what's your opinion on the idea that pushing onto new technologies, new toys to play with, could be harmful for accessibility even more than it actually is already?
It is a very important part of the whole discussion, and sadly enough, nobody raises their voice loud enough and shouts about it. Because right now, we're innovating leaping bounds, and we break conventions that we had before, and sometimes accessibility falls behind. Mm-hmm. Also because that there's sometimes a discrepancy between the two. For example, I talked about figure and fig caption, which is something we wanted for years. We wanted to have like a description of an image connected with an image. Mm-hmm. And we have this now in HTML5, but no screen reader does the direct connection between the two. So to make it available for somebody who is using low vision and uses a screen reader, I have to put an area labeled by and an area labeled element on there and give each of those a unique ID. That's the kind of stuff that doesn't hurt us much as accessibility developers, but somebody who comes from the HTML5 is as least code as possible. That seems like extra overhead that we don't want to have. So we have to make a better way of advocating the benefits of using these things. Actually, to me, it's quite annoying that area has not been part of the HTML5 specification, hasn't been shifted over to it, and is still seen as this bug fix problem instead of just being part of the main innovation drive that we're doing at the moment. So we always had the problem that the web development world was innovating and doing cool things and breaking the boundaries and breaking conventions, and the accessibility world was saying like, wait, everything you do might be a problem for accessibility. Yeah. But they never ever actually came up with hard figures or hard numbers that said like, why is that a problem? You can get.
Do you think that we can actually do that? Because there were in the development of HTML5. Let's take the example of long desk, for example. There were research to document the usage of long desk, and there's a certain limit to this. At some point, you can only ask your friends, or you can make a survey, and then you'll get people that are actually using it because they're the ones that are in contact with Twitter or other services that actually allow them to know about these things going on. So it's always biased in a way if you get results.
To a degree, a long desk has the problem, like any other of these things. When it's not visible, it's hard for developers to care about it. Mm-hmm. So it's also more of an editorial problem to me. Writing a long desk by hand does not make much sense to me. This should be the job of a content management system, providing you with a necessity to provide a long desk attribute for a very complex image when you create the image in a certain tool.
But then you'd have to be able to interpret that image, which we don't have. The technology is not there yet for that.
But exactly. The problem is that when it comes to tools for building web applications and web development, we don't think about accessibility. I mean, take for example WordPress. If you build WordPress and you do a drag and drop of an image in there, it creates a title attribute on the image, but an empty alt attribute. It doesn't provide you with like a figure, a fig caption, or a long desk option at all. It's like it's always seen, accessibility things in content management systems are always seen as like extra work that the editors should learn in the past. So our job as accessibility advocates should be to make these discussions more mainstream and say like, just show how many problems people create by doing certain technologies and doing things in a certain way. When I did my scripting enabled event, for example, in London, I had people with different disabilities go on stage and show like, when they use the internet, where did they get stuck and why? And there's so many simple things where people get stuck that you can fix quickly, like a language attribute on something that doesn't read out text in French English when it's really French.
Do you think that initiatives like Fix the Web can help in that sense then?
Definitely. I think the accessibility world should think more about crowdsourcing and more about finding the voice of end users and the voice of the community to go to developers. Right now I see a big disconnect between the accessibility world and the development world. And you even see it in conferences. You have CSUN conference, you have these big accessibility conferences where only people who care about accessibility meet with each other and talk about each other. Then you see these entrepreneurial conferences where people talk about little iPhone applications and talk about you ship the code as fast as possible because you want to make money and get VC funding. Doesn't matter what your code does. If it's links that are completely empty instead of buttons, who cares? The interface is there and you have built something. So the quality of development has gone downhill, I think. Right now we're innovating a lot in HTML5 and we're building fast applications to prove a point of what application can be built, but we don't take pride in the source code and the quality of the source code. I've been going through the HTML5 advent calendar and I showed all the source code of that, and I showed that people used links with JavaScript void 0 instead of using a button, for example. So they didn't make it keyboard accessible, they just had hover elements on there, and I just don't get it. I just don't get why developers do these things, why they don't just understand that they're building a barrier that's not really necessary to be built.
But do you think it could be because our media is still very young and there aren't that many rules that are set specifically? Because in other industries you wouldn't see this. If you're making a movie, if you're building doors, if you're doing things on the radio, you have certain formats that you have to respect.
Yeah,
we don't really do that much still on the web.
We don't have the standards. I mean, for example, captioning of video, there's no captioning format for HTML5 video that people agreed on yet. And I don't know how that happened, I don't know, because it's very important for video to have captioning. So we have to think about these things. I think where it comes to that, we have to show use cases. If you show how accessibility enhancements of products make it easier for everybody else as well, then much more developers will start caring about them and will put them in there. Captioning is a great example. Closed captioning on television, the most use case I've seen for that is actually fitness studios and sports bars. In a sports bar, you will have a football game running with the captioning in there. So everybody has a benefit from that. Otherwise, if you would say captioning only has to be put on television for people who are hard of hearing, then people say, why do we spend money on that? That's only 5 people. Whereas if you say, well, you can be in the pub and still follow your football game because you see these captions there, then people will say, okay, that's a good thing to put in there.
Everybody agrees that it's a good thing.
Yeah. So I think we need to mix these communities much more, and making very, very expensive accessibility conferences is not the way of doing that. I think we should force web development conferences to have at least one accessibility talk that is about hot new technologies. We should take the accessibility world out of their comfort zone and say, like, you have to deal with that new stuff as well, because otherwise people will not care about you, and innocent people that have a disability will suffer because we're not talking to each other.
That's a good point. It's pretty much what we had here this week at Confu. Last year it was a conference mostly back-end. This year there was a few front-end things, and accessibility was quite visible as well.
Yeah, we can infiltrate it. We can make it.
Infiltrate.
We just have to start. We just have to start thinking modern technology in the accessibility world, and not seeing modern technology as a scary thing we shouldn't touch.
Good point. Well, good talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye bye.
See you soon.